what's up? It's ElaineAlways, and this was long overdue, but I realized that I've never really given you guys a proper introduction to Blender itself for new Blender users. First things that are key here, if you've already installed Blender, you know that it's completely free. I just think that's worth mentioning again. The whole reason that we are using this program is because it's open source. Open source means that something is designed to be free and modified to users' needs. There are no restrictions, there's no copyrights, there's no fancy corporate paywalls to stop you from using this program to its maximum benefit. This is made by the Blender Foundation to always be available to you and for you to use to the greatest lengths of your imagination. So I just wanted to cover that real quick. That's why I'm obsessed with Blender. That's why I love Blender. That's why the syrup system was made in Blender, and why this was finally the version of rigging that I took seriously and thought I should release to other people, because I found that the software that supported it was one that I trusted. So, all of that out of the way, Blender's kind of scary the first time you open it. Depending on what version you have, you may not even have the right mouse keys selected to click the way you normally would, because Blender originally was made so that you click with the opposite mouse buttons. Yes, so you would right click to select things and left click to open properties, or sort of, the other click essentially. It's reversed, it's flip-flopped, it's mirrored, it's the worst. Now, Blender 3.3 and above, I believe, don't have that issue, but just to be certain, I'm going to show you how to access the panels and settings to make everything work as smoothly as possible and for my tutorials to be easier. So, step one, you're going to go ahead and go to Edit Preferences. And again, if this doesn't open when you click on it, and it does this instead, try the other mouse key. But if you are using Blender 3.3, the first mouse key, or the left one, should work just fine. So, first things first, you're going to go into Preferences, and this cute little window is going to open up, and you're going to go ahead and go to Key Map. Now, I prefer Blender 27. So, Blender 27 or Blender 2.7 is the original key map that most people have used for the longest time. Now, you can switch to the new one if you want. It's completely up to you, but I will say that my tutorials use Blender 2.7. As such, if you're relying on my tutorials, it may be easier for you to use that key map as well. You don't have to, but I will tell you that if you learn 2.7 key map, it won't stop you from being able to follow tutorials in the future. That I can promise you. Now, I use Blender 2.7 or Blender 27X, and I switch to the left mouse button to be absolutely sure that's working as expected. Save preferences, and I do literally nothing else with key binding whatsoever. I'm very happy with the key binding that it has. The next thing I did when I first installed Blender that I think is worth doing, if you like it, if you don't like it, doesn't matter, is setting up a custom theme. Blender has a few lovely ones already built in, but there are thousands online that you can find, and I also have ElaineAlways' Candyland theme available for free in the description of my original video, and I will keep it in the description of this video too, just in case visually it is hard for you to identify things. You can try Candyland or a different theme if you so please, but I just wanted to explain why is my Blender so beautiful and pink. And that's why, because I've done some slight modifications to make Blender the way I like it. Or Blender will probably look more like this. All of that's fine and good. Now, all of that looks great. Just save your preferences and close this. The other thing that I often do is I choose not to load a UI or user interface every time I open a file, and this is because sometimes when you open other people's Blender files, it will rearrange the entire layout of Blender, and I don't know about you, but sometimes that is literally terrifying for me. I'm like, what just happened? Why is everything different? I don't know where to go. So I just uncheck that in Save and Load and save those preferences, because I personally don't like that. I find that really stressful when you open a new file and you get like a whole new interface. It's really overwhelming. So that's all the stuff that I do. Now, your original Blender file, or your first time opening Blender, you're probably going to get this stupid cube. This is the default cube. Oh, default cube, my beloved. Everyone gets one. You will never forget your first cube. I'm kidding, you absolutely will forget your first cube. The point is, every single Blender file that you will ever open that is brand new with nothing in it starts with a cube. It's kind of annoying sometimes, honestly, because I don't need the cube, right? And we're all tired of deleting the cube. Us Blender users are sick of deleting the cube. Sometimes we delete the cube and then realize, heck, I needed that cube, and we have to make another cube. So what I do is I hit A to select all, delete it, and I just get rid of the cube. Then I hit Control U, save startup file. This means that when you open it, there will no longer be a cube that you will impulsively delete for no reason. And if you need a cube, you can hit Shift A, and there's your cube. Oh, and it's gonna spawn wherever you put that thing. So that is, I believe, the 3D cursor. If you hold down Shift and use your right mouse key, if you're using the correct mouse input, then you can put this literally anywhere. That cursor will come in handy sometimes, other times it's just kind of annoying and it's just there. But if something spawns and it doesn't spawn right in the middle of the scene like it's supposed to, hit Alt-G, Alt-R, and Alt-S, and everything will shift into the center of the space like it's supposed to. So these are just some of the quick Blender basics. If you press the S key and move your mouse, you're now able to scale things up and down. And the moment you click, you release that scale. If you hit Alt-S, it should go back to the scale it was before. If you hit G, that'll allow you to transform or move things around in the location space. And if you click, you will release it, and if you hit Alt-G, it will go back to where it's supposed to go. If you hit R, you can rotate things, and you know where this is going. Click to release, Alt-R to set it back to where it goes. This is a universal thing that everyone in Blender uses. You can say, why don't we just have like a little thing in the corner? And like, sure, you can use like our little gizmos, but actually you'll find that gizmos and like interface things that are visual will be annoying and slow you down. So the sooner you just learn R, G, and S, the sooner you will be working fast in Blender without stress. The first time it's annoying, but it literally takes a couple days of using Blender, a couple hours a day, and you'll completely forget that you're pressing those keys. I certainly do. I know it sounds stupid at first, but I'm telling you, when you work in 3D, you need to be able to use a lot of key buttons instead of having everything be visually in front of you. I know that you probably want things to be easy to click on, and you can do something like this. Like if I don't remember how to move things, which would never happen, but I can click move right here, and it will give me a visual guide. So that's an option, but I strongly recommend let Blender do what Blender does, yeah? So learn your G, Alt-G, R, Alt-R, S, Alt-S. Your hand should be right near those keys when you open it. Like your left hand should be resting around the scale, R, and G keys, because those are the keys you're going to use the most, along with E and W. And F is another really good one. Be careful with H. H is right next to G, and it will make whatever you're using disappear. And the first time this happened to me, I absolutely lost my poop and panicked. But just hit Alt-H, and it will come right back. Don't even worry about it. Just don't press H if you don't know what you're doing. The other thing you'll see me doing is moving around in my space, like this. This is sometimes described as tumbling or panning, but what I'm doing is I'm using the middle mouse key. That means if you're using a laptop, I either recommend you finding a way to emulate the mouse key. There, I believe, is a setting for that. Or you get a proper plug-in mouse or wireless mouse, because the middle mouse key is so useful in 3D. Now what we do is primarily 2D, so you won't need it as much, but it's still important to have. Now I'm going to show you the syrup system and different ways that you can sort of navigate a file in the syrup system. So if you open it in perspective, you're going to be like, what am I looking at? All you got to do is press the num key 0. If you don't have num lock on, turn it on, press the num key 0, and you will pan to the direct camera view, and what you'll see in the camera is what is actually happening. So this is what it actually looks like. But if you press the middle key, it's gonna do that, and that can be really scary. Now, if you're getting lost in the Blender space, hit the home key, and it will take you back to the center of your save file, to where the place you want to be, or hit the 0 key to go right back to the camera view, which is easily the best place to be when you're animating in 2D. All you should care about is what the camera sees. So I think that in general covers most of what you're going to need to know to use Blender. The other things to consider is that rotate, scale, and move tool or key set works for literally everything in Blender. So if I am animating, and I go into Blender, literally you're going to be using the rotate, the G, and the S tool for everything. For animation with the rig, even if, let's say, I open another window here, you can just do this by clicking in this corner and dragging. And I switch this window to timeline so that I can keyframe and animate. So even in like the animation dope sheet is what we call that. I'm sure you guys know what keyframes are. You can select this and scale it to make it faster or scale it to make it slower. You can press G to move it around, and you can press, I don't know what R would do actually. It looks like R just sets keyframe type because you can't rotate something on a timeline, but at least not for dope sheet. But basically what I'm telling you is that R, G, and S work for every single part of Blender and always will. I do want to cover this whole dragging another window out. When you click in the corner of windows, it creates another window, but if you keep doing this, you're going to get yourself in an absolute mess. So to collapse, click back in that corner, drag it back down, and it will collapse that window. That is one of the most stressful things that beginners have to deal with, and I will post other videos covering more things about just how like stressful and difficult the interface is when you don't know what to do, and quick ways to resolve those types of issues where you're getting overwhelmed by the interface, you're clicking the wrong things, and then more bad things are happening, and you're like, what keys do I press? I'm gonna ruin this whole save file. I will show you other beginner tutorial videos that do even better coverage of this type of stuff than me. But the timeline is how you see what you're animating. So if you open it and it's just like this, all you gotta do is shove your mouse in that little corner, drag to lift. Here's this double window, and then you're just gonna click. This bar may be at the top. I prefer that little bar to be at the bottom. If you go to interface in the preferences, you can actually switch it. I believe, let me see here. Oh yeah, header position. Put it on the bottom. Generally, I just think that works better for me. You can keep it at the top. You can choose to bring it up or down. That's an option for some people. You can move it around. But I prefer it at the bottom. So if you're like, where are you clicking? Just make sure your header's at the bottom. Or look at the top so that you can find it. But yeah, so you're just going to drag this other window, and then if you go to this header or this bar here and click on this icon, editor type, you can choose timeline. And on timeline, auto keying allows you to make keyframes for every time you move the character. If you see armature here, click on this, you can see every single bone and what keyframes they have. Super useful if you're trying to isolate a specific thing. You can also choose, instead of timeline, dope sheet. But dope sheet doesn't have a play or pause button because timeline is sort of the preferred way to animate. So what you do is you switch to timeline, and then all you're going to do is drag out another window and squish timeline down so it's just this bar. Switch this to dope sheet, and now you have dope sheet and timeline, and you have your press and play. And you have the option to auto key. This is the layout I prefer in all of my editing or all of my animation videos, is timeline, dope sheet, and on the side we have the properties panel, and this here is an outliner. You can find everything in the entire blend file here, though it can be overwhelming, so sometimes I just close this image data collection, and then all I have to look at is the physics sim bake, which controls hair physics and soft physics, and the armature. Alrighty, I hope that covers the basics for you. Feel free to check out other Blender tutorials. Remember that there are a million resources at the touch of your finger. Don't rely on me, but ask me for anything and I will do it for you. Absolutely. So, that's ElaineAlways, #7327 on Discord. Contact me, we can do a live session.